Hey guys, it's Mathel here once again, and no, the title of the video is not lying to you. I did make my first summoner. Kind of, sort of. You know what? Fuck it, it is a summoner by all intents and purposes. Before we get into that, it is just kind of worth showing you that the Cobra Lash assassin did take on Uber 2 or 3 times by the end of the character's existence. It was, just a little bit painful getting through the higher tiers to get all the right maps and do the Zana quest several times on the first character. Usually I save it for the second dude, but this character was just so much fun to play and I really enjoyed exploring the mechanic with it that I just kept on going, played it for like 3 full days of playtime, which is well more than I usually do for a starter character, and it took on all the endgame content pretty damn smoothly. I'm pretty sure most of the Guardians were deathless, most of the tier 16 maps and the red maps were really quite smooth, and then a few Uber Elders where I did die a couple times, but that's just my own fault for the most part. So yeah, Cobra Lash Assassin would recommend. Now, as for my first summoner build, the idea behind it was to go minion instability, and that means using a couple of items and gems to make skeletons when you summon them, burn really quickly, and then explode for a bunch of damage based off of their life. So you're supposed to scale a lot of minion life, so the skeletons have a lot of initial life, and then minion damage to scale the minion instability as well. As it turns out, you can't really do that just by itself. You pretty much have to start summoning shit as well, which is why you see me with an army of zombies, a carrion golem, and by the end of the video, a few specters as well. So I am basically a summoner. I am constantly summoning skeletons for the explosion, which still counts as being a summoner, I suppose. And then we have our Vile Summon Skeleton button as a huge sort of nuke against bosses. In the end, the zombies do some respectable damage. They're really not my actual damage source, but they can help clean up. They can actually help defend, and as well as that, do some decent overall gameplay for the build. But it's mostly all about the minion instability summon skeleton build, which is kind of like many other things. It's kind of like having a mine build or a trap build or a storm call build, or something that you basically right click, have a slight delay, and then have a huge payload off of. That's what summoning with minion instability is like, and I've got a couple little clips here of how it's been functioning in these blighted maps, which this is probably one of the laggiest ones I had in the end. But yeah, it's very safe, and you just have a nice little meat wall for you using zombies. You chuck out your huge nukes of minion instability and clean up entire packs, which has just ridiculous damage. Overall, I think minion instability was probably the biggest damaged early game build I've ever played. So up until, like level 70 or something, the scaling is just so instant and so drastic that you've got more damage than you'll pretty much ever have during the leveling phase, because you seem to just scale really quickly since there's only a few, solid ways of actually scaling this type of build. So by the time it gets to level 70, it's got a lot of its damage, which is quite substantial, and I'm one-shotting every boss out there and just actually one-shotting them, not just looking like it's a one-shot. We're talking 100 to 0, especially when you press Vile Summon Skeletons, and the big Vile Summon Skelly is the first one to die. It explodes for like a couple of 100,000 damage, and we're talking like level 60. So it's been a very smooth experience. It's been very fun. It's not necessarily pure summoner style, and for the most part, I don't think summoners are even bad anymore, or at least mechanically bad, because it doesn't really feel like playing a summoner. You're not really playing what a traditional summoner was in Path of Exile, or in a lot of these types of games, which I don't like, which is summon some stuff, wait for it to go kill stuff, and then move on. You're basically just playing any other character at this point. The summons move at such an outrageous speed, going from pack to pack, smashing shit. They've got a lot of area, a lot of cast speed, a lot of attack speed, a lot of movement speed, a lot of damage, and they can clean everything up by themselves without you really needing to do anything. The whole kind of mess of summons in PoE to begin with, it's kind of the micromanaging and just how annoying it was to play and how to have to wait around and be uncomfortable with it. Whereas now it's all on autopilot and it's all mega fast. Like, all of my zombies basically are unkillable, and I'm not even trying to scale zombies, I'm trying to scale my summon skeletons, which is kind of the same thing, but my zombies at like level 18 have 70,000 life and haven't died, they're unkillable, and they do a bunch of damage, and they're really fast, and I don't have to use anything like Convocation even. So it's just the summoning playstyle. I hardly feel like a summoner right now. I'm just a guy that runs around right-clicking huge nukes onto enemies that happens to have a few meat walls on passive standby helping me out. So it's not that bad. I don't really mind it. I don't care for hating on this playstyle or thinking, ooh no, I'm playing a summoner, which is something I typically didn't want to do and typically was against doing. It's just a whole different side of the game to learn for scaling, since I don't really look at minion nodes or minion gems or the minion types of gear. So I had to look at a lot of different things and get familiar with all of that. And ultimately, it is a minion instability build, and I think it might be an extremely strong, yet on a supreme budget type of build by the end of it. And let's get into how I've built it so far and what the character looks like. So there is my character so far, level 82, technically a summoner necromancer. It's the second necro I've ever made. The first one being like 3 or 4 years ago, I think, when the Scourge came out, which is a unique claw of Chimera boss that had like applications of minion damage to yourself, and I made a build around that with Spectral Throw, not summoner related. First real necro I've ever made, and like I said, based around your skeletons being summoned and then degenning themselves through this mace, as well as the Infernal Legion support gem, so that once you have a skeleton summoned, they quickly kill themselves and then explode for a lot of damage through the minion instability node here, which does 33% of their max life as fire damage to surrounding enemies. So you can see what happens. You summon 4 skeletons, almost immediately just pop and die. They have a real nice satisfying pop sound as well, so it's a pretty nice build to play aesthetically as well as ear aesthetically. Yeah, that makes sense. And it ends up working out pretty nicely for single target damage because you have 4 skeletons at the moment being summoned at once at, as you can see, 14,500 life. That will still get a little bit higher. And you can spam up to 10, 11, 12 of these. And currently I think each minion instability is rocking something like 150,000 damage. So it's got to be something like a million DPS off of really not much of a requirement. Every time you pop your Vile Summon Skeletons, you summon a shitload of skeletons that each pop off almost, you know, as soon as they're summoned. And it's a huge bunch of bursts that so far hasn't come in handy for any more than the first few summons. So you can summon, it says max 40 summon skeletons, and usually the first like 2 will kill a boss. So it's huge overkill, and we haven't really got a chance to put it to its test just yet. So the build based around this item, which helps kill them really quickly. It's a level 35 scepter. You can duel with them as soon as you get them at level 35 and then become a build. And then we've also got Malagaro's Lens, which is minus 50 to elemental resistances, which you apply with Necromantic Aegis to your skeletons. So the skeletons have much less resistances and then burn a lot faster so that you can actually get your minions exploded quicker. Now you should be able to see the effect of that here. That's pretty quick, right? You take that off. They take a little bit longer to die because they don't have all that minus resists. As well as that, whenever they die, they also give you 2% of max life, of their max life, to you, which is pretty nice as just a little bit of an extra heal and defensive mechanic. So you can see that I do currently also have 4 summoned specters, because you may as well have them in this build when you're scaling so much minion life throughout the tree. I'm trying my best to just get minion life through everything I'm doing. Your zombies, your specters, your golem, they all end up having a lot of life and just being tanky, and you may as well have them because you're scaling minion shit. So these specters here are Tukohama Guardians, which drop Scorching Ray totems, which should serve to lower the fire resist of my enemies so that my skeletons can pop and do more damage as well. So these specifically are summoned to buff my skeleton damage. And then I've also got my zombies here that have, like I said, 70,000 life. They do some decent amount of damage. Rarely will I actually let them like do damage, but against plenty of stuff that survives a little bit longer, like bosses and all that, they'll swarm the enemy, they'll do some damage, and they'll also help you take some damage. And they've got, there's 10 of them up at the moment, and they're pretty damn fast with all the nodes you get throughout the tree. Then also grabbing a Carrion Golem, just because why not? Help everything I have do some damage, and he's a pretty funky new minion. So that's pretty much the sort of weird interaction of the build. Besides that, you still want a bunch of resist, a bunch of life. I'm not too well lifed up at the moment, so I'm fairly squishy. I'm probably going to go into Mind Over Matter with some unreserved mana, but I haven't really done too much of fine-tuning of the build. It's only level 82, so don't judge it too harshly just yet. But like I mentioned, I am just trying to scale around minion life and minion damage, because the two ways of scaling minion instability are only minion life and minion damage. No spell damage, no fire damage, none of that scales your minion instability. So you just have to go out of your way to try and get as much minion life as possible, and then some minion damage on your gear, as well as your passive tree. And you also got to be careful to not take too much resistance nodes, which is a pretty big reason why I don't have something like this, Indomitable Army. Gives you decent max life, but also has 15 to all res, which means your minion instability triggers a lot slower on your enemies. Thus, I can't really take that, so I have to be careful as to which nodes I take. I decided I could afford to take this one for the 10 res, because it also has a nice chunk of life for 1 point. But you can't take too many of those, otherwise things take too long to die. So it took a little bit of learning what minion nodes do what, and I have taken this one as a notable for my amulet, as you can see. So it's just a little bit too far away to travel. Grab Ravenous Horde, give some movement speed, attack speed, all of that. And this was the first thing I took while leveling, because it's pretty damn cheap and a huge quality of life early on when summoning my minions. Aligned Spirits. You take it at level 1, put it on a Citabreath amulet, and you got yourself a pretty nice army just to begin with. So it's a very smooth leveling process. You can do this solo self-found just as a summoner if you don't really have any of the minion instability shit, because summoners and minions right now are just so strong. You take whatever the hell you want as a necro, you go the main sort of necro nodes, and then I've also got Plaguebringer for more damage, and your minion army is just going to take care of everything off of like no currency, no gear, just as long as you're taking some minion nodes throughout the tree. But since we've also got this and this going on, and Infernal Legion, our skeletons actually do some pretty fat single target damage for our minion instability. So that's what the build is based around, but it ends up being kind of a traditional summoner, which doesn't play all too bad at the moment. So we have Summon Skeletons, which is a Vile version attached to Infernal Legion. That's what makes the build function to begin with. Currently Combustion, Minion Life, and Minion Damage. We'll have a 6th link of maybe Ellie Focus, take out Combustion, maybe do some Conk Effect, maybe an Empower. Still exploring the last couple of gems there. Then also rolled a Bone Helmet, an Elder Bone Helmet that has ideally Minion Life and Minion Damage, because those two additional supports do grant increased life and increased damage as these little stats down there. But you can also then 6-link your zombies with whatever the hell you want. Currently I've got Feeding Frenzy, Minion Speed, Raise Zombie, and Elemental Army. Since I'm wearing Malagara's Lens, my zombies also have minus resists, and if I want them to survive a bit more, I decided to go with that. My Spectres down here have Raised Spectre, Minion Life, Elemental Army, multiple totems, so they're dropping extra Searing totems. And then down here I've got Stormbrand, Curse on Hit, Flammability, and Ellie Weakness. So I Stormbrand on packs or bosses that really need a bit of extra damage. So I curse them with both of these huge amounts of minus fire resist. And as well as that, we have Elemental Equilibrium, which you pick up pretty early on as soon as you can, so that you are making enemies resistant to lightning, but lowering their fire resist so that your minion instability does a shitload of damage. It's pretty worth doing, and it scales the damage quite high, so that's the purpose of Stormbrand in the build. And then I've also got Summon Skitterbots, which run around and shock and chill things very effectively, very quickly, since I'm a minion build. And then a Clarity, and that's currently what my mana is reserved for. And then I've got Flesh Offering, Carrion Golem, Flame Dash, which I'll probably attach a nice little faster casting to at the end of the day, and Desecrate, so that I can actually pop my Flesh Offering every now and again to give them a buff, as well as getting Plague Bringer up for myself for the extra damage and reduced damage, and then giving them increased area. The way I actually got my ascendancies was Plague Bringer first. I then, once I got to Cruel Lab, unspec'd this and took Mindless Aggression, and then into Bone Barrier. I then went into Unnatural Strength and then Plague Bringer. There is a different version of the build that uses zombies that then goes into Corpse Pact instead, because you use Akuna's Will, I think it's called, gloves that make your zombies treated as corpses, and thus your zombies have 50% more life. And in the end, that zombie build has something like, I don't know, 250k life, something like that on their zombies, and it hits a lot harder as Infernal Legion, but it is a slightly different playstyle, and the gloves are a lot more expensive, so I'm doing a much cheaper version of the build with the Skeleton Explosion as a minion instability instead of the zombie one, but you can find some zombie versions out there too, and explore those yourselves. But I'm seeing if the skeleton one will work, and so far, so good. It's been pretty nice. Some of the dumbest leveling, some of the most autopilot gameplay, and we'll see if it goes straight through to the end game, because so far it's been pretty good, but maybe it tapers off a bit before it gets right to the end game. I think it'll be fine. It looks like it's got the damage, and the playstyle, not even that bad anymore. You know, summoners, kind of not really a traditional summoner playstyle anymore. It really does feel like just another character that's got a slight delay to its damage. Like I said, like a Trapper, a Miner, a Stormcall, something like that. So for now, guys, that's my first summoner little build and guide. Hopefully in the next few days I can get another video out for you where it's doing all the other content. But I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.